So nationalism, it's feelings of extreme, excessive pride of your country or nation. And it's the belief that your country or nation is better than all the others in the world. So it sounds a little bit like patriotism, but it's extreme. Now, if you live in a monarchy, which is when you have a king, that can get very awkward. If you're not a fan of the king, you better not tell anybody because he's in charge. So there's a close-up of the building that I showed you earlier with the poster. So we have the king's father and the king's grandfather, and then you can't actually see the king, but he's at the top. And so everywhere we went, restaurants, you even go into McDonald's, there'd be a poster of the king. It was very strange. This was just a picture of the mall culture. I wish I had more pictures of the mall because it was, think about the Mall of America, but completely marble floors, extremely fancy. So this was the only picture I could find of it, so it's pretty funny. All right, and I should have put these earlier in the slide, but the Tree of Life, this was a tourist destination because it was one of the only trees in the country. So everybody goes to this tree to touch it and get all excited and, wow, it's really here, it's a tree and it's huge. This is a picture of, not Bahrain, different country, United Arab Emirates, or maybe you've heard of the city there, Dubai. They have a lot of oil, so they're very wealthy, and they actually built an indoor ski park in a mall. So if you grew up in the desert your whole life, never got to see snow, you could pay, $50, rent your boots, rent your coat, and go and have a good time. So I didn't actually do it, but I thought, whoa, that's crazy. All right, so now we're getting into sort of the darker side of the Middle East, so that was more the fun stuff. February 14th, and that should say 2010. So February 14th, 2 years ago, the Arab Spring happened in Bahrain, and they called it the Day of Rage. But before we go into why it happened, we got to talk about the two groups of practicing Muslims that live in Bahrain, the Shias and the Sunnis, and you may have heard some stuff in your classes about this. But if you're Shia, well, let's make a comparison. If you're Catholic or Protestant, do you worship the same God? Mm-hmm. Yep. Do you read the same book? Pretty much. So the differences lay in how you interpret certain verses or the way that you choose to do things, right? But you really, it's pretty similar. It's the same with Shia and Sunni. They believe in the same God. They have the same text, the Quran. The difference is in how they interpret and practice different things. So most of the time they get along. And in my school, half of the students were Shia and half were Sunni, and some of them were friends. They got along fine until this happened. So if you were Shia in Bahrain, you're 70% of the population, so you're the majority, but there are only 14 Shia in the parliament, which is made up of 40 members. So that's less than half of the majority. It's strange. If you're Shia, you are not allowed to be a citizen, so you don't get your ID card the same way. You don't get the same rights as citizens. You are not allowed to work for the military or in any government jobs. You are not going to be hired for certain jobs or career opportunities. They're going to see your last name, and they're going to go, oh, that's a Shia name. They're not even going to call you. You're not going to have a chance. And so what happens is you don't get as good of a job. You have to live in the poor neighborhoods, and your kids don't go to as nice of schools. And yes, this is blatant discrimination. It is, done by the government. So the Shia were pretty upset about this, and in February of 2010, they came together and they asked for citizenship, equal job opportunities, equal representation in parliament, and they really wanted to have a democracy instead of a monarchy. And they said, we can still have a king, but we just want his power to be limited. We want to be able to vote on different things that are important to us. We want a democracy. So that's great, right? Well, some people in Bahrain were worried. They said, if the Shia are given equal rights and the right to vote and all of this in parliament, they might vote for extremely religious laws. And Bahrain might become a lot more strict and become almost like Saudi Arabia, where women would have to cover all the time and it would be a lot more strict. That's what people were thinking might happen. But many of the Shia were saying, no, not at all. We just want equal rights. We're not going to do that. And so name-calling started happening. Students at my school, if they were Sunni, they might call the Shia, you're a traitor. The Shias would call the Sunnis king lovers. I mean, there was name-calling. It was getting really tense, and things were getting ugly. And so the Shia organized a protest at the Pearl Roundabout. In this photo, me and my friends went to the protests, and I was terrified that my father would find out because he had made me promise not to go. So I didn't pose for this picture because I was afraid he would see it on Facebook. But we went to the protests. The prince had told the people, you can protest as long as it's peaceful. You have our permission, nothing will happen to you. And the prince was a pretty good guy compared to the king. So everybody trusted him. They went to the protests, and it was very peaceful. People were extremely welcoming when they saw Americans. They were very, oh, thank you so much for coming. They moved out of the way so we could sit way at the front. So we were way up at the front. And then there was all these people giving speeches. And people were translating all the speeches to us in English, giving us free food. I didn't see any weapons there, personally. It was peaceful, I can assure you that. Well, the king decided to overstep what the prince had said, and he didn't like it, and he ordered the military to go in the middle of the night. So just hours after those other photos were taken, people were sleeping in tents because they were spending the night at the protest site. The government came in with rubber bullets and just started opening fire on people. And there were women and children there. And so this is an actual photo from that day. I had left by then. We heard about it the next morning. They called it Bloody Thursday. 4 people were killed and 300 were injured. People who were injured were rushed to the nearest hospital, and the doctors who happened to be working, they said, oh, people have bullet wounds, and they started operating and doing a normal thing. They were arrested for conspiracy against the king. And some of them are still in jail, and that was 2 years ago. Some of them were my students' parents. They're just doing their job. They don't care politically which side you're on. If you have a bullet wound and you come into the hospital, they're going to treat your wounds. And so people were outraged. You can see somebody crying that they've lost somebody. How did the Sunnis respond? The other side? Well, the next day, after all these people died, they decided to have a day of pride parade. So they had a huge parade, and it was right outside my apartment. Thousands of people showed up, and this infuriated the Shia who had lost loved ones. It was pretty disrespectful. So this is nationalism right here. The flag right here, that's the flag of Bahrain. All these posters of the king. This was their way of showing disrespect to the protesters in the name of, we love our country. Obviously, you don't. Even children. There's the Grand Mosque in the background, so just right out on the street. People decked out their cars. Traffic jam. I actually sat in traffic for about 3 hours. Now, what is the significance of this poster? Well, the king's name is Hamad al-Khalifa, and the protesters would always chant, down, down, Khalifa. So this is someone on the other side saying, up, up, Khalifa. So everything was chaos. Bahrain went into a state of lockdown. Schools were closed. Our school was actually vandalized and closed for a few days, and we were locked in our apartment. Why was our school vandalized? Because some students were Shia and some were Sunni. And some people didn't like that they were mixing like that. So they decided to vandalize the school. This is actually a barricade to stop people from getting to the school. Those are just trash cans turned on their side. So it was very strange, not a soul on the streets. Restaurants closed. And you know if McDonald's is closed, there's a serious problem. Right? Graffiti everywhere expressing anger against the king. We have down government, down Hamad. That's the king's name. Stop killing innocent. These are actual rubber bullets from the attack. Some students who were there gave them to one of my friends. And so the purpose of rubber bullets is you're not supposed to shoot someone with it. You're supposed to shoot it on the ground, and it bounces up, and that way it doesn't hurt them. And it's just a way to get the crowd to run away. But they shot people with them directly. There's a poster expressing some anger against the king. They're just everywhere you turn. We will not kneel except to God. Hello, we are getting killed over here. That one was kind of almost funny, but you can see the frustration. Now, the government didn't like this graffiti, and they wanted to stop. So they decided, let's go into the Shia neighborhoods and just burn down some of their mosques. So that's like their churches. So imagine if, the government was Protestant and they went and they burned down Catholic churches, or vice versa. You know, nobody in that particular one had done anything. They weren't targeting a certain person. They were just trying to scare the people who lived in the neighborhood. And another thing that would happen is the government would go to the Shia neighborhoods on like a Friday night when people maybe want to go and have, you know, go see their friends. They would just shoot tear gas into the neighborhoods as a precaution to stop them from doing anything. Not shooting tear gas because there was rioting going on, but just, let's just shoot some in there so they don't do anything. So we knew people at school who were teachers, who were Shia, and they said, I can't even leave my house on the weekend because there's tear gas all over the place. So people were pretty mad. The protesters had a march to honor the dead, and now instead of saying, you know, the king should stay, but we want, you know, democracy, they're saying, no, overthrow the royal family. This was personal. They retook the Pearl Roundabout and had a huge celebration. This is a video I have. Maybe we can watch it at the end. So they retook the Pearl. It was a big celebration. There's some Shia protesters giving the peace sign. You can see those blobs. Those are thousands of people at the location of the protests. There's the Pearl Roundabout. There's more thousands of people. You can just see more photos of it. Another shot of the Pearl. If he's a protester, why does he have the Bahrain flag? Because both sides said that the flag represented their purpose. So that's why in some of these photos, you're like, well, wait, which side has the flag? Well, both sides use the flag. Here's a Shia sitting with the flag, holding a candle. Another great, that's a beautiful shot of the Pearl. So after that, sometime later, the government retook the Pearl Roundabout and burned down the tents where people were camping and destroyed the Pearl Roundabout. And it was so sad because they were known for pearl fishing and pearl diving, and this was sort of a national monument before it became politicized. Now it's gone. That makes me sad. So now protesting has gone from the Pearl to the streets. And when I was teaching, some of my students would show up late for class, completely sleepy, and I knew what they'd been doing. A lot of the Shia boys would wear all black. They would go out in the streets, and they would be riding against the police all night long. Friendships have been broken, children and parents arrested, businesses shut down, and actually one of my students was arrested, and he's still in jail. He was accused of burning down a Jeep. I don't think that he was the type to do that, but even if he did, he's 16. He's not an adult. He shouldn't be in prison. So, and I actually just emailed his sister yesterday to see if anything had changed, and no, he's still there. So it's a serious situation, and you don't really realize how how wonderful your lives are and your rights until you see people have it completely taken away. So there's another shot of the tents burning. We don't differentiate between Sunni and Shia is what that one says. So that looks like a first aid tent. Then I have a funny video at the end. I don't know if we have internet. This is a Gangnam style Bahrain video that one of my students made, and it's pretty funny. But if I click on this, will this work? We don't have to watch the whole thing.
Well, I've got this linked on my website, and
Oh yeah, okay.
So if you guys want to see this, you guys will be able to click on it.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
So do we have time for a few questions and answers? Any questions? Yes.
This was like 2 years ago, right?
Yes.
So do you know what the current situation is right now? Like, what's the government doing? Are they still protesting at all?
Mm-hmm. So there's a big investigation by a human rights group that was like, you can't do that. You can't arrest doctors for treating wounds and calling it traitor against the king. So a human rights organization came in, investigated, said you can't do these things, and they said you need to release people from prison. Some of them have been released, some of them have not. The protests are still happening, although so many people have been killed that people are scared. And sometimes you'll just get arrested if they suspect that you're doing something. So there's a lot of fear and intimidation going on. And if you're Shia, you're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And actually, I forgot to tell you what happened to my friend. He's a teacher. The students who were Shia were really upset. Some of their parents were in jail. The Sunni kids were like, well, let's just, they took a bunch of posters of the king, hundreds of posters, came into the school, put them all over the walls, all over the walls. So the Shia kids whose, parents were in jail or brother was in jail, they're all crying, they're coming to the teachers and saying, I can't be here, I can't stand seeing the king posters everywhere. One of my friends who was a teacher, at the end of a very long day, somebody put up a poster in his classroom, and he just kind of snapped, and he said, who did this? And he took it off the wall, put it in the trash. A student texted their parents, who worked for the government, and he was fired and on a plane that night. That's how much influence there is. So the school was like, we're sorry, like, we really like you, but we're being watched by the government. If we don't send you home and fire you, then we're going to be in trouble. So it's not a lot better, and I know the protests have been moving closer to the school, so I'm kind of glad I'm out of there now. Yes?
You said they had to translate the speeches, so what's the native language?
Arabic. So, I wish I knew something, well, what do I know? Yalla yalla, that means go. I don't know. Other questions? Yes? Because it was an American school and I was an English teacher, lucky me. Everybody spoke English for the most part, so I should have learned more Arabic, but it was so easy to get by without it. Other questions? Yeah?
You said that some kids would call each other names. Did you ever have like a fight break out in school?
Yeah. Yes. Multiple times. And it would be like, we were like English only, because if you're speaking Arabic, you might be saying some horrible things. So one time a kid just started, 1 minute they're sitting there and they're whispering, and I thought they were just talking. The next minute, like 3 desks went up in the air, and they started punching each other, and like one of them had ripped his shirt open. And he was like, ah! So, I mean, it was tense. And so some of the friendships have recovered, not all of them have. So it's too bad.
He's not the Hulk.
Other questions?
I don't think he's that strong.
Yeah.
Do you think the Shia will ever get those equal rights, or like how long? I mean, because some of those other countries, they've been able to overthrow their, dictatorships, or so is that a possibility, or
The prince is really a good guy, and he's dealing with, his dad. I think it really comes down to if the king dies.
okay.
And even then, I mean, there is the fear that if the Shia were given complete representation, they might vote away their own rights and create a very strict religious environment. So, as much as we love democracy, what can you do when you might vote away your own rights? So I don't know. That's something I still wrestle with. But that doesn't change the fact that they're discriminated against, and it's blatant discrimination, and it's very hard to be Shia there. Other questions? Yes?
Do you think they're ever going to rebuild the Pearl?
No, never. And actually, the pearl was all over their coins and all over their money, and I mean, those are becoming like collector's items. So, whenever I was in a gift shop and I'd be like, oh, they got pearl stuff, I would buy it all up, because it's becoming kind of a polarizing symbol. So, yeah.
So would the prince become the king if the king died?
Probably. I think that's how it works. But it might be the king's brother. It might be like whoever's the oldest. I'm not sure. I think it would be the prince, though. Yeah.
So wouldn't that mean if they kill the king and the prince is a good guy, and if the prince rose to power, that maybe he would give the Shia democracy?
Well, the prince has got a whole bunch of people he needs to keep happy, like his entire family. Also, because Bahrain is connected to Saudi Arabia, and it's like the size of a dot, and Saudi Arabia is huge, they rely on Saudi Arabia liking them and giving them stuff and helping them be a country. So they have to keep Saudi Arabia happy. And so if Saudi Arabia says no, they can't. They really don't have that much power. I mean, they're the size of a county in Iowa. They're tiny. So they really rely on, is Saudi mad at me, or is Saudi happy with me? So it's really tough. I don't think the Shia are ever going to have equal rights there. So, sorry, it's kind of sad. Other questions? Are we out of here at 54? Well, thank you so much, guys.